The word Sphinx is the name that the ancient Greeks gave to this strange half-human, half-lion creature. But hold on, the Sphinx is not just any fantastic creature. It represents the pharaoh as a person with different origins because half of its body is of an animal. As you know, in ancient Egypt, several gods like Thoth, Anubis, Sobek, Serket, and Meretseger had bodies that combined human and animal parts. Although there are many representations of sphinxes in Egyptian art, one of them stands out from the rest. It's the Sphinx located at the entrance of the royal cemetery of Giza, where the three pharaohs, several queens, and dozens of nobles were buried in the Old Kingdom, around 2600 before Christ. Historians cannot agree on whose face was represented on that Sphinx, the pharaoh Khafra or his father Khufu, the king who built the largest pyramid in Egypt. There are two theories because nothing is mentioned about it in any ancient text, so not everyone agrees on its identity. The Great Sphinx of Giza is the largest stone statue in the world. It's 73.5 meters long and the top of its head peaks at 20 meters from the ground. However, this Sphinx is not like other statues you have seen before. In fact, as the project was enormous, the chosen location was a small stone hill. Then, some stone cutters began to carve the hill into the shape of the Sphinx body, while sculptors took measurements and added on carved stone blocks to complete the whole statue. This trick allowed them to create a gigantic statue that was very solid but with much fewer stone blocks. And it saved them a lot of time too. During the New Kingdom, some changes were made to the statue. They painted its body red, a color used in art to represent the skin of man, and they added a false braided beard that they pressed against the chest to make it stay attached. This false beard is one of the symbols of a king's power and also one of the emblems of the god Osiris. Unfortunately, as it was not part of the original statue, it was more fragile, and when the face of the Sphinx was damaged, we will get back to this later, it collapsed to the ground and broke into several pieces. Today, a piece of it can be seen in the British Museum in London. Based on this piece, specialists have calculated that the false beard was about 7 meters high. That's enormous. At the start of a new kingdom, about 1000 years after the Sphinx was built, ancient Egyptians from surrounding cities worshipped the giant statue and called it Er-Emharet, from the name of an Egyptian god that the Greeks called Harmachis. This god was simply created to highlight the pharaoh's divine origins. Over time, the Great Sphinx of Giza became the icon of a god for the ancients.
There must be a great view from up there.
Obelix, of course. Well, that's what the comic book Asterix and Cleopatra tells us. In reality, the poor Sphinx face was damaged twice, particularly in the 14th century. We know this because an Arab author of that period wrote about a mad religious man who ordered people to destroy the face of the Sphinx because he couldn't stand the fact that the local peasants considered this statue a god. At the beginning of the 19th century, when Bonaparte, the future emperor Napoleon I, arrived in Egypt with his army, he was accompanied by a very important group of scientists who went there to study the ancient civilization and later published the description of Egypt. The first volumes published were gigantic for books. I had a chance to see them with my own eyes, and they were more than 1 meter wide when open and 70 centimeters high. The British, who were then at war with the French, spread the rumor that it was Bonaparte soldiers who had destroyed the nose of the Sphinx by firing cannonballs at it. Of course, this wasn't true, but they hoped the Egyptians who did not live around Giza would believe the rumor and would be mad at the French for having destroyed such a monument. And of course, they also hoped that in Europe people would think very badly of Bonaparte after this crime. Fortunately, the truth prevailed thanks to the ancient text. The first author to mention remarkable Egyptian monuments was the Greek historian Herodotus. In particular, he mentioned with admiration the pyramids of Giza, which he saw with his own eyes. But he doesn't say a single word about the Sphinx, which may seem strange. Later on, other travelers and historians decided to make a list of the most spectacular monuments of the Mediterranean basin. But the Sphinx was not on my list either, even though the pyramids were. Isn't that weird? No, in fact, not at all. The Sphinx was not listed for the simple and good reason that it was buried under the sand at the time. Maybe a little bit of its head appeared, but its enormous body disappeared under tons of sand. So it's logical that the Sphinx could not compete as one of the wonders of the ancient world.